owner of David Silver Spares in the UK and David Silver Spares the US in Pennsylvania. And I'm talking about my recent trip across the US looking for new old stock parts, vintage jack bikes in barns, etc., etc. So, we started the trip at the Las Vegas auctions, which took place early in January, and between Bonhams and Meekham there was 1,000 classic motorcycles auctioned off in 3 days, which is now an all-time record for the two auctions at that time. Some interesting prices were achieved. This RC30, which reached a record price with commission of $51,000, which is rather contrasts against the one that was sold by Bonhams at Stafford only the end of last year in October, which only reached below £10,000. Admittedly, it wasn't as nice as that one, but it only goes to show that not everything is cheaper in America. We've got some interesting exhibits. This looks like an innocent fish delivery motorcycle, but during the time of Prohibition was actually used to deliver bootleg whiskey and bathtub gin. The bottles were hidden under the ice where the fish was stored, and made a complete delivery service throughout the 20s in America.
Was there any whiskey and gin in there, David, during the auction?
I didn't look, but it'd be pretty stale by now if there was, I should think. We ourselves took to auction from our Pennsylvania depot 47 bikes altogether. Now the cost of transporting those bikes between Pennsylvania and Las Vegas was $6,500, and we didn't make any provision to take them back, so they were all sold with no reserve. Quite a risky undertaking. To give you an idea of how risky it can be, this particular Yamaha 1974 RD 350 we bought from the Midwest and took it back to our Pennsylvania depot, cleaned it up, got it going, poured loving all over it, and got it running. Spent a lot of time on it, and it was within a gnat's whisker of being sold for $500, which would have been a huge loss. However, just as the hammer started to come down at Meekham, another bidder stepped in, and within about 30 seconds the bid was $4,000, which gives you an indication of how quickly things can move at auction. So, the actual auctions themselves, great place for meeting people and significant collectors in the US. We met the professional buyer for the son of the chief executive officer of a corporation called Cargill, which is one of the top 10 US corporations in America. He has a personal collection of 1,000 motorcycles, full-time mechanics, and the buyer goes to just about every auction, and an auction like this would spend $200,000 to $300,000, and at the end of it would just call the accountant and tell him to settle up. We had met a San Diego collector with 600 plus bikes, who also had a complete set of 1960s Honda CR race bikes. So what is the reason for the rise in classic jack bikes values? Or what is the cause of the boost? And I personally believe it's the same reason as classic cars. Meekham, for example, have recently sold a 70s muscle car for $3 million at auction, albeit a limited production one. UK car auctions are also producing staggeringly high results. I think one of the reasons is US and UK quantitative easing or money printing, which has produced billions of extra money that's found their way into the stock market, making investors feel better off and add to that zero interest rates, and you've got the perfect background for people looking for this type of investment. Well, the upside of this increased value is that gives us more scope to spend money on tooling, which is not cheap, because of the high demand for parts, and so we can supply more parts for some of these older Hondas. While the auction was going on, we went to the world's biggest electronic show called CES, Consumer Electronics Show, which was going on at the same time. We were particularly interested in 3D printing with a view to printing spare parts in the future. Give you an idea of where it's at the moment, and at this show you're looking at things that will be on the market in 2 to 3 years' time. Often you really are looking at the future. This 3D printer is now available for below $500. It does have limited use for producing any spare parts because it can only print in plastic and it's fairly brittle. 3D printers were there, printing in all manner of materials, hundreds of 3D printers. This one actually uses paper, so you can take all the paper that you don't want, stuff it into one side, and it will cut hundreds and hundreds of images of the object that you're trying to make, glue them together, and it's far more robust than the plastic 3D printer. Here is an example of what is printed. A conrod made of paper, but not much use as a conrod, but nevertheless it is pretty solid. This prototype fuel tank was 3D printed for Harley-Davidson as an experiment to see an experiment with the shape of fuel tanks. Now, it's not much use to print something like that in a 3D printer as a resale as a fuel tank, because you're looking at $450 worth of plastic in that, but nevertheless it's coming on a long way. That, for example, a fairly complex object that was a model of a bike which was 3D printed. We found an interesting object that we've since taken up is at the CES, a pocket jump starter, which once you charge up in a wall socket or a cigarette lighter, produces enough power for 15 to 20 jump starts, and is highly mobile and charges up your laptops, etc. So that was us at the stand. So having finished at Las Vegas, we then moved on to Washington, West Coast. We'd been